ghouls and fiends, welcome once again to another edition of the Ministry of Horror. I am your host, as per usual, Tez, and we are back with another one of our record sessions. So we had a good old time last week talking about legacy sequels, did a few reviews, had a good old chat with the live chat. Also talked about the news that the live shows are no longer going to have watch parties afterwards. Very sad. Still haven't decided yet on incorporating gaming or not. I feel where at the moment my my gaming time is dominated between either playing Final Fantasy 16 on the PlayStation, which is in the living room, so not ideal for a streaming setup. I mean, I could stream there, but it would be the really bad audio of the PlayStation headset and microphone. Headset microphone? Yeah. Headphones. With no video. Or playing my new gadget, my new old but very good condition gadget for video listeners. Picked up a 3DS a couple of weeks ago, so I've been playing Ocarina of Time. Having a blast. I'd forgotten how much I love that game. I got the Nintendo Online service for the Switch Online service, about a year or so ago. It's been over a year because the service has now run out. And one of the first things that I saw on there was you could use the N64 virtual console to play Ocarina of Time. And I thought, excellent. And Majora's Mask, which I never actually played. So I was quite excited about that. But truth be told, the control setup, the mapping of the N64 controller to the Switch controls was just really quite difficult, especially the aiming mechanics of the slingshot. And so for a long time I've been thinking, I need to get a 3DS again. I ended up finding one in the second-hand shop. And got a nice little... I mean, it was quite expensive, but got a nice price. There were some trade-ins. So for once, the trade-ins were actually quite useful. But the ramble of that is horror gaming. Now, I told myself for a long time that when I finish Spider-Man 2 on PlayStation, I'd return to Alan Wake on the Xbox and potentially stream that, because I have done, I think, 2 streams of Alan Wake, which were quite fun. And then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was coming out, and I thought, I need to finish Final Fantasy VII Remake before I can play that. But in reinstalling that, I just thought, you know what? Let's jump back into 16. And I'm still playing 16. It's a massive game. It is almost a bit too long. I mean, the hours I've put in for the comparison to RPGs these days, where RPGs seem to be about 60 hours plus, I've done 27 hours, maybe 24. So not, I've still got a long way to go, but I think we're now getting to the point where quite a bit of time has elapsed since I last played Alan Wake, that I may well have that scenario. I don't know if any gamers listening to this encounter this, where you take a break from a game, either to play something new that's come along or something else grabbed your attention, or gaming time hasn't been that much available. And when you then go to return to it, you think, right, I've, jump back into the world. I'm not restarting this. I'll jump back in and pick it up where I left off. But you jump back in, you think, oh, God, how many quests have I got lined up? Oh, God, what do I need to do for these? And it's very difficult sometimes, I guess, depending on the type of the game, to get back into the swing of things. And I guess that's a little bit of my fear. I do remember the story beats that we got up into that point, so maybe I'm just worrying over nothing. That is quite possible, but maybe we jump into Alan Wake. I've looked a few times on Steam at single player focused horror games, and it is just difficult, really difficult. A lot of them are multiplayer games that just maybe have a single player function, but they're not narrative focused single player games. So, yeah, I think the likelihood is I'm going to have to look to see if I can get a decent 4K HDMI splitter that works, so I don't need to faff around with unplugging the HDMI cable from the TV to my Xbox to then hook up a capture card. I mean, at the end of the day, these are first world problems. This is me being a lazy bitch. That's the truth of the matter here. But ultimately, I do want to do something to get back into streaming. Just outside of the regular horror show, but there's a bridge we'll cross when we get there. I hope everyone's been catching up on some awesome horror, whether that's TV shows, films. Not too sure on what kind of current horror TV shows there are. I mean, there's some news, which we'll get to a bit later on, about Chucky. But outside of that, I can't think of anything that's kind of come up on my radar recently. With this being the pre-recorded shows, we don't have a featured presentation, so it's going to be a fairly condensed show for you. I hear you cheer. We're going to look at some horror news, and then we have 2 films to review. So our modern, newish film is the 2023 horror Baghead, and our retro review today is Stage Fright. That was a request in the Discord. It's currently on Prime. Typically when watch parties go from Twitch, Prime start pumping out some classics on there. They've got a modern classic, I would say, other than maybe the ending, in Cobweb. And they've also got Stage Fright, the original. So the original 1987 release. So pretty exciting, but unfortunately we can't stream it. Boo hoo. Anyway, without further ado, ghouls and fiends, it's time for the horror news. This is the news. There we go, horror news jingle done. So this, as per all of my horror news, comes from bloodydisgusting.com. Write-ups from John Squires. The 4 new horror movies releasing this week, including Late Night with the Devil at Home. So remember... So starting off, I kind of skip past their blurb. I don't need to read all that. Remember Quibi? The short-lived bite-sized entertainment experiment gave us some horror gems, including a horror anthology series from Sam Raimi, most of which is currently unavailable to watch anywhere. But there's good news for one of Quibi's projects this week, as Vina Sud's series The Stranger has found new life over on the Hulu streaming service. Written and directed by Vina Sud, who did The Lie, 7 Seconds and The Killing, Quibi's The Stranger has been recut into a feature film and it's now streaming only on Hulu. In The Stranger, news of Los Angeles, rideshare driver Claire, played by Micah Monroe, picks up Carl, played by Dane DeHaan, from a home deep in the Hollywood Hills. In what began as a routine ride turns into Claire's worst nightmare, a 12-hour fight for survival through the city's seedy underbelly. Carl is not the passenger Claire thought he was, and Claire is not easy prey. Ivan Georgia also stars in this thriller. I mean, Dane DeHaan for a while was getting a lot of big roles, and I always kind of didn't quite understand why. He didn't seem to have leading man appeal. I mean, I don't think he's necessarily a bad actor, but he did seem to be having a bit of a moment. You know, we've talked before when actors suddenly seem to be appearing in a lot of things, and I guess it's just a case of booking a number of roles which, through circumstance, get released at a similar sort of time. But, yeah, I haven't really seen him about in much recently, although he is in Oppenheimer, which I've still not seen. And Micah Monroe, we're big fans of her on the channel. It Follows, The Watcher. So pretty interested by that. Now, it's a Hulu release. We don't have Hulu in the UK, but Hulu releases tend to go on Star. I think it's called Star or Stars? Star. On Disney+. So, worth keeping an eye out on. Next up, on the way from Redwater Entertainment is the Japanese horror slasher movie Love Will Tear Us Apart, which slices onto digital and on demand this Tuesday, April 16th, so 2 days ago at the time of recording. The film is said to offer a stylish twist to the Japanese horror and slasher genres. Love Will Tear Us Apart follows Wakaba, a young woman grappling with her traumatic past. As she ventures into new romantic relationships, Wakaba realizes she's being followed by a relentless masked murderer. The mysterious killer targets anyone who dares to get close to her, turning her quest for love into a fight for survival. Directed by veteran filmmaker Kenichi Ugana, who did Visitors and Extraneous Matter, the film stood out at multiple genre festivals in 2023, earning acclaim from both critics and audiences. So I am very behind on modern Asian horror. Very, very, very behind. I've only recently picked up the box sets of Ju-On and the Ring collection. Had a great time having a first-time watch of Ju-On The Grudge, and a good old time rewatching the original The Ring. But outside of that, it really has been a long time since I've really watched any foreign language horror. I think it's where quite often I kind of tend to have things on in the background. I'm sort of multitasking, which is quite a bad habit, especially with the phone, with the mobile phone, the cell phone. If you're in America, there's an awful habit that I've kind of crept into of putting a film on, and then maybe after 15 minutes, maybe after half an hour, either looking at notifications on my phone or checking out social media. And that's not really a great habit as it is when it comes to watching any form of content or entertainment, because your attention isn't fully focused on it. But that especially doesn't work when watching something foreign language. I don't really like watching foreign language films with, and when I say foreign language, I mean as in non-English speaking. I don't really like watching them with dubbing, just because I've tried it before, when I know that my attention may deviate from the screen and I may miss, key elements of the plot in the subtitles. But it just isn't as engaging to me when it's really badly dubbed, and they're never well dubbed, are they, really? So yeah, I mean, the likelihood of me seeing this, I don't know, maybe. But it does sound pretty interesting. The screenshot on Blood Disgusting looks pretty crazy. The next big theatrical release for the horror genre brings radio silence back to theatres, with vampire ballerina movie Abigail opening on Thursday, April 18. In the film, after a group of would-be criminals kidnap the 12-year-old ballerina daughter of a powerful underworld figure, all they have to do to collect a 50 million ransom is watch the girl overnight. In an isolated mansion, the captors start to dwindle, one by one, and they discover to their mounting horror that they're locked inside with no normal little girl. From Radio Silence, the directing team of Matt Bettinelli Olpen and Tyler Gillett, behind the terrifying modern horror hits Ready or Not, 2022's Scream and last year's Scream 6 comes a brash, bloodthirsty new vision of the vampire flick, written by Stephen Shields and Guy Busick. Abigail stars Melissa Barrera, Dan Stevens, Catherine Newton, William Catlett, Kevin Durand, and Angus Cloud as the kidnappers, and Alicia Weir as Abigail. This is very high on my to-watch list. I don't think it's coming... I'm sort of deviating a bit here slightly, but another film which, when the trailer dropped, it finally jumped up high onto my list of, okay, I'm very interested in watching this, is Cuckoo. So if people haven't seen, there is a trailer available for that. Check it out. It looks... I don't really know what it's about, and I like that. I've gotten to the stage now in my horror fandom and my content fandom, I suppose specifically with horror films, I quite enjoy knowing as little as possible going into it. Like Immaculate, I'd maybe seen one trailer once, and that was it. I just knew it was a new horror film getting cinema release. I'm interested, I want to see it. I've seen a couple of trailers for this, and I generally get the gist. But with Cuckoo, again, not to go off too much on a tangent, an unrelated tangent, I've seen the one trailer. I don't know too much about what it's really about, and that's fine by me because it's got my interest. I don't need to see anything else until the film drops. With Abigail, I've seen the original trailer. I've seen like a second one. I'm going to avoid seeing the trailers again, or any new trailers, until it's available here in the UK in the cinema. I don't know when its UK release is. We've got an action-packed weekend coming up, but payday next week, so yay. So if it is available in the UK next week, that's a must. And then next up, The critically acclaimed horror movie Late Night with the Devil was released into theatres nationwide last month, and it's next coming home to Shudder beginning Friday, April 19th. David Malchin stars as the host of a late-night talk show that descends into a nightmare in the Ghost Watch and WNUF Halloween special-inspired film. David Malchin stars as Jack Delroy, the charismatic host of Night Owls, and the film traces the ill-fated taping of a live Halloween special in 1977 plagued by a demonic presence. The energetic and innovative feature hails from Australian writing directing team Colin and Cameron Cairns. The film premiered last year at South by Southwest. So if you're new to the show, we have done a review of this. Very fortunate to see an advanced screening, and that review episode of Ministry of Horror has done really, really well. So that brought some new eyes to the show, which is great. But I think more importantly, it's also showing that this new indie film, and it is an indie film, has really created some waves in the horror world. I'm hoping it's put David Malchin on the map as a leading man, because he's had, he's been in a lot of things, but not in leading roles. And I'm really interested to see what Colin and Cameron Cairns come out with next. Apparently, they've also done 100 Bloody Acres and Scare Campaign. Now, Scare Campaign, that sounds vaguely familiar. I say this now, and I've not actually looked into them before. Probably should have done. Probably not a good idea to do my usual thing, getting sidetracked. No, that does not look familiar actually, but it's one that I might want to check out. Anyway, so that is coming to Shudder. I don't know if that's in the UK at the same time. I imagine it will hit Shudder at some point. With Shudder do tend to release a schedule of their releases in the different markets, and I know it is on there. So, hey, if you haven't been able to get to the cinema to watch Late Night with the Devil, get a Shudder subscription or a free trial for a week and give it a watch when it hits there this month. And then finally, while it's not a horror movie, we also want to mention that the Bigfoot movie Sasquatch Sunset is being released nationwide in theatres on April 19th. The Oddball movie from filmmakers David and Nathan Zellner was notably executive produced by Ari Aster, who did Midsommar and Hereditary. Sasquatch Sunset documents a year in the life of a singular family. In the misty forests of North America, a family of Sasquatches, possibly the last of their enigmatic kind, embark on an absurdist, epic, hilarious, and ultimately poignant journey over the course of 1 year. These shaggy and noble giants fight for survival as they find themselves on a collision course with the ever-changing world around them. Starring Riley Keough and Jesse Eisenberg, acclaimed directors David and Nathan Zellner bring you the greatest Bigfoot story ever told. Christoph Zalzajek-Denek also stars in the film. Well, okay, but it mentions it's not a horror movie. But, well, I mean, hey, if it appears on a streaming service and I recognise it, I might give it a watch. I don't think I'd be going out of my way to watch it personally, but that's just me. If you're a fan of hairy scaries, less so the scary, just hairies, then you might enjoy this. Let's move on to some other horror news. So, I dropped this in the Discord actually earlier today after seeing it on Twitter, X. Aliens vs. Avengers. Xenomorphs fight superheroes in Marvel Comics mashup this summer. From John Squires of Blood Disgusting. Well, it's finally happening. It was only a matter of time before Disney-owned Marvel characters and the Disney-owned Xenomorphs came together for an epic mashup, and Entertainment Weekly has announced this morning that Aliens vs. Avengers is coming soon. The upcoming series from Marvel Comics comes courtesy of writer Jonathan Hickman and artist Esad Ribic, and Entertainment Weekly has shared cover art and details today. Here's the official synopsis from Marvel Comics. It's all led to this. Xenomorphs reach Earth. The perfect organism meets a planet of superheroes. Who will be first to fall? I've never worked on a licensed or non-superhero property the entire time I've been at Marvel, so when all of this came together almost 2 years ago, I kind of jumped at the opportunity, Jonathan Hickman tells EW. I love the Aliens universe and the mythology, and obviously just how atmospherically and well designed everything has always gotten my creative juices flowing. It was tricky finding a way to make these two things work together, but I think Isad and I landed on something that works for fans of both franchises. Probably one of the coolest things about the project is how we found really fun ways to Avengerize aliens and alien up Avengers, Hickman continues. I think fans will be surprised at how elegantly some of these things fit together. It really turned out to be a chocolate and peanut butter situation. Aliens vs. Avengers 1 will be hitting comic book shelves on July 24, 2024. So the first artwork has been released, which features Captain Marvel, Iron Man, and Captain America, and a xenomorph. Note the clever twist on the iconic Wayland Yutani logo. Okay, so I mean, I've not read any modern comics, graphic novels, trade paperbacks, for a little while. I think the most recent one I bought was Craven's Last Hunt, which I didn't realise how old that was. And I'm sure the story itself is great, but I always find it quite jarring getting a classic story, trade paperback, and then the art style being earlier than my earliest memory of comics and being a bit less modern detailed. Whether that's a thing to be quibbling about, I'm not sure. But essentially, yeah, the last trade paperback of a comic I bought was that Craven's Last Hunt. So I'm really not that up to date with the Aliens works, especially Aliens in Marvel. I don't know if they've previously had any Marvel releases of Alien comics. I know that Dark Horse were a real sort of propagator of those back in the day. And I guess back in the Dark Horse days, the Aliens versus Predator series was really big and ultimately kind of led to the films for, well, there is no better, it's for worse, basically. So essentially, I have a bit of trepidation about crossovers for the Aliens, because ultimately they're just going to be cannon fodder. Do I think we're probably going to get a Queen appearance? Yeah, probably. And the Queen alien's badass. Do I think we're going to get some super-powered alien when something goes wrong, or some Z-list superhero gets a face hugger? Yeah, probably, and that could well be quite fun. But I don't know. I mean, the prospect of the aliens crossing over the Avengers isn't. I mean, I know that there's been crossovers before, hasn't there? I'm pretty sure the aliens have had crossovers with DC, with Batman. And that would make sense because Batman, especially in different eras, could be quite dark, quite horror-centric in places. You know, they've had Judge Death appear from 2000 AD. And that's pretty gnarly. With Marvel, I do know that they've had Marvel Zombies, and I've read some of it a long time ago, so it's not as if Marvel are not capable of doing horror. Do they do it under the Disney banner since Marvel was bought by Disney? I don't know. Can't answer that one. But yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of the Avengers and fan of Xenomorphs, that is coming soon, so check it out. Next up, Drop. Violet Bean joins the cast of Christopher Landon's new thriller. Again, John Squires by Disgusting. Christopher Landon, who did Happy Death Day and Freaky, is staying busy here in 2024, directing not only the werewolf movie Big Bad, but also an upcoming thriller, Drop. The project for Blumhouse and Platinum Dunes is being described as a fast-paced thriller, and Deadline reports today that Violet Bean has joined the cast. Newcomer Jacob Robertson also signed on to star in the mysterious thriller. Previously announced, Megan Fahey will be leading the cast. Landon recently teased on Twitter, "This is my love letter to De Palma." Gillian Jacobs and Chris Roach wrote the script. Michael Bay, Jason Blum, Brad Fuller, and Cameron Fuller, who brought the script into Platinum Dunes, are producing the upcoming Drop. Sam Lerner is an executive producer. I mean, my initial kind of thought is, okay, there's going to be some sort of either body swap element, or there's going to be some time travel element. that's probably a bit unfair, but it did seem as though a number of his films had that kind of template. And yeah, maybe that is unfair. Maybe that's just a case of, had a couple of releases which have that kind of style. They're not necessarily the same. Body Swap isn't the same as time travel or time loops. So I probably am lumping him in to a bit of a demographic there, which may well be very unfair. But it still wouldn't surprise me. That being said, Happy Death Day, the first one I thought was pretty good. I wasn't that fussed with the sequel, and Freaky was alright. So, worth checking out. Next up, Screamboat. Steamboat Willie horror movie coming to theatres in 2025 from Iconic Events releasing. The short film that introduced Mickey Mouse to the world, again, John Squire's write-up, bloodydisgusting.com, 1928's Steamboat Willie entered the public domain this year, and a handful of Mickey Mouse-themed horror projects have already been announced. One of those films is titled Screamboat, and Bloody Disgusting has learned that the filmmakers are teaming with Iconic Events releasing for a theatrical release. From the production teams behind Terrifier 2 and The Mean One, Screamboat is coming to theatres in 2025 via Iconic Events releasing. We have been informed this afternoon. In Screamboat, a mischievous mouse stalks a group of New Yorkers on a late-night ferry ride, unleashing murderous mayhem on a relaxing commute. Can the ship's motley crew of travellers find a way to stop a killer creature who has developed a taste for tourists? Iconic Events couldn't be more excited to get in on the ground floor of what is going to be a fun and terror-filled ride, said Stephen Mencken, president and co-founder of Iconic Events, allowing filmmakers like Steve Lamort the opportunity to showcase their films in movie theatres nationwide and bring horror fans together to experience this unique story is what Iconic is all about. We are more than excited to partner together on Screamboat. Lamort's previously untitled horror parody of Steamboat Willie will begin production this spring, with the filmmaker and his producers promising buckets of blood and unhinged chaos as their miniature mouse attacks a group of ferry commuters against the unmistakable backdrop of New York City's iconic skyline. I'm thrilled to partner with Iconic Events releasing to bring Screamboat to theatres across the country, says director Lamort. We're collaborating with incredible artists both in front of the camera and behind the scenes to bring a very unhinged horror comedy to life in the way it's meant to be seen, on the big screen. We can't wait for audiences to meet our mischievous, murderous mouse. Screamboat will feature a mix of practical creature effects, miniatures, and cutting-edge virtual production to showcase its very mischievous monster slashing his way through a ferry of fear. I mean, I have the same interest in that as I did as the Winnie the Pooh horror films. It just seems like such a blatant, I mean, it is a blatant cash grab. It's entered the public domain, so let's make a horror version of it, because that's what people want. People want a horror twist on a classic fable. I can't see it being anything other than tripe. I mean, I probably shouldn't pass too much judgment. I've not seen The Mean One. I've not seen the Winnie the Pooh film. I know there's like Three Blind Mice. There's a horror film of that. There's a few other ones, and just the concept of it is a bit, not really my kind of thing. But I shouldn't pass these judgments until I watch them, and maybe I will. That though does not interest me in the slightest, I must say. So, next up, John Squires again, Blood Disgusting, he's a busy man. Looking for new episodes of Chucky on Peacock? Here's what has changed. So he writes, we've been getting a lot of questions about this week's episode of Chucky Season 3, which aired on USA and Sci-Fi last night and was expected to be available on Peacock today. After all, we had previously been told that all new episodes of Chucky would be available for streaming the day after they aired, an exciting change from previous seasons of the hit horror series. And while last week's mid-season premiere of Chucky indeed did arrive on Peacock last Thursday, this week's episode, titled Panic Room, is currently missing from the service. So what's going on here? The official Peacock TV Care customer service account over on Twitter has been responding to fans who are wondering why they can't stream this week's episode of Chucky on Peacock, and their answer indicates a shift from the original plan. They write, new episodes of Chucky Season 3 will be available on Peacock 7 days after they air on Sci-Fi. This means that Panic Room won't be available for streaming on Peacock until Wednesday, April 24th, the same day the second to last episode of Season 3 arrives on USA and Sci-Fi. This is a huge bummer for all the cord cutters out there and anyone who's unable to watch new episodes of Chucky as they air live on USA and Sci-Fi. The show's Peacock strategy has been wildly all over the place from the beginning, but it's especially strange to have been promised next day streaming only for the plan to suddenly change without any warning. Just 2 more episodes remain in the back half of Chucky Season 3, which was split in half as a result of last year's WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes. The final 2 episodes, There Will Be Blood and Final Destination, will be airing on April 24th and May 1st, which means you can expect There Will Be Blood out on Peacock May 1st and Final Destination on Peacock May 8th. Oh, God, right, that's a big mouthful. I mean, ultimately here in the UK, it will arrive on Sky Sci-Fi, I think is the channel that it aired, or Sky Max. I think it was Sky Sci-Fi. Yeah, talked before, I'm behind. Maybe I'll catch up, maybe not, don't know. Maybe what I need to do is I did pick up the box set, the cheaper version of the box set, not the Arrow Fancy £80 box set of the Child's Play films, the Chucky films. So maybe if I start rewatching through them, or at least the first few, that might get me back on the choo-choo train of Chucky. Who knows? A couple of bits left to go over in the news. Next, The Platform 2. Netflix shares first images from the sequel to the 2020 hit. Galda Gaztelu Urushia's The Platform, I probably butchered that name, apologies, was a massive hit on Netflix back in 2020, becoming one of the most watched original movies in the streaming service's history. Coming soon, The Platform 2. Netflix has shared 2 first-look images from the upcoming sequel this morning, which will again be directed by Galda Gaztelu Urushia. Milena Smith and Hovik Kukarian star in The Platform 2. Netflix previews a mysterious figure has managed to establish a new law in the platform. But can justice truly be enforced in hell? And who will enforce it? No word yet on a Netflix premiere date for The Platform 2. Stay tuned. The first film is set inside a vertical prison system where inmates are assigned to a level and forced to ration food from a platform that moves between the floors. Inmates on high floors eat better than those below, and one man tries to effect change so everyone gets enough. Raphael reviewed The Platform for us at TIFF, raving in his 4.5-star write-up. The Platform takes full advantage of its isolated setting and small cast to instead focus on a high concept, a tight script, and sharp dialogue that will make you laugh as often as it will make you think. This is a funny, heartfelt, at times disgusting, yet also thought-provoking sci-fi thriller that reminds of Bong Joon-ho's Snowpiercer, but with way better food. I have seen the original Platform, and I remember it being pretty decent. I think it's quite depressing. I can't remember how it ended, which is a bit poor form of me, but I remember it being pretty good. So I imagine a sequel is going to be the same concept, new character entering. Again, I can't remember how it ended. He might have died at the end. Yeah, there we go. The Platform 2 coming soon. And then finally for the horror news, Caroline Williams starring in Christmas slasher movie He Sees You When You're Sleeping. Again, John Squires, blooddisgusting.com. Bloody Disgusting has learned this week that Caroline Williams of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 fame has joined the cast of He Sees You When You're Sleeping, a Christmas slasher slated to be released this holiday season by the Horror Collective. In the upcoming slasher, a young man's Christmas homecoming turns into a nightmare as a killer in a Santa suit gruesomely picks off his estranged wealthy family for their fortune. Williams is joined by Nicholas Vince, known for his role in the original Hellraiser, as well as David Lennox, Peyton Michelle Edwards, and Lauren Marie Taylor. Director-producer Charlie Steed said in a statement, "I knew David Lennox's campy Christmas-themed slasher would be a blast to direct. It's set in the 80s and we filmed on location in New York State. The script draws inspiration from horror classics such as Black Christmas, Scream, and Silent Night, Deadly Night, which are all films I adore. Christmas horror films blend holiday cheer with thrilling chills, offering a fresh and exciting twist on traditional celebrations. They're perfect for those looking to spice up their holiday viewing, commented Shaked Berenson, CEO of the Horror Collective's partner company, Entertainment Squad. The Horror Collective is the genre label of Entertainment Squad, a finance distribution company founded by veteran producer Shaked Berenson. The label's latest productions include the Killer Pants cult classic Slacks and the critically acclaimed LGBTQ plus horror comedy Summoning Sylvia. Yeah, Christmas horror slasher. I mean, Caroline Williams is good fun. I've not really seen her in too much outside of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and I think she's got little blink and you miss it roles in a couple of the sequels. Nicholas Vince is the Chatterer from Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2. I'm not familiar with the others. Lauren Marie Taylor was in Friday the 13th Part 2, but I couldn't tell you who they were in that. There we go. That is it for the horror news. That was the news. Oh. And that brings us to the first of our reviews for the week. We're going to start off with a retro horror. Now, this is a request that appeared in the Discord. I believe Matt Wyatt and I think also maybe Fran the Cannon had mentioned talking about stage fright, which, yes, if you're watching on the video platform, I did forget to sort out the artwork, and it is now appearing on the screen very hastily. But fear not. Stage Fright is a 1987 Italian slasher film directed by Michael Sciovi and starring Barbara Cupisti, David Brandon, and Giovanni Lombardo Radice. The plot involves a group of stage actors and crew who lock themselves inside a theatre for rehearsal of a musical production, unaware that an escaped mental patient is locked inside with them. So I'll just sort of talk briefly about the plot. We'll then talk about the highs and lows of the films, and I will give you my score out of 10. So late at night, a theatre troupe are rehearsing a musical about a fictional mass murderer known as the Night Owl. Peter, the director, is very domineering toward the group and tries to prevent them from leaving under any circumstances without his permission. When an actress named Alicia sprains her ankle, she and castmate Betty sneak out of the theatre for medical assistance, the closest being a mental hospital. When speaking to the psychiatrist, Betty notices an imprisoned patient named Irving Wallace, a former actor who had gone insane and committed a killing spree. Unbeknownst to any of them, Wallace has killed one of the attendants with a syringe and snuck out of the asylum to hide inside Betty's car. So, straight off the bat, the concept of this film I absolutely loved. So, one of the things that really stuck out to me with this film was we never really get that many films that I'm aware of that take the concept of just a traditional urban legend. And obviously, yes, we've had the film Urban Legends, and that was the whole concept. But what I mean is a particular straightforward tale that you would tell around a campfire or at a sleepover or whatever when you're a kid. That is the basis for the film, essentially. You know, an escaped mental patient going back to attack, a group of actors, theatre troupe, and he's also a former actor, is straight out of, the escaped murderer with the hook hand. Or, I mean, there's a short story collection, I don't have it to hand, which includes the first story in the collection is called God, I can't think. I'll have to kind of come back to that. It was on one of my TikToks. The Grimior, I believe, is what the collection is called. But the first story in that involves a absolutely diabolical mental patient escaping from the hospital and kidnapping the daughter of the psychiatrist. It's just a really quite creepy tale. But again, it's very basic in its setup. The simplicity there is kind of just what works and what makes it kind of terrifying. And with this, it is essentially just a practice with a really over-the-top, imposing director and these really nasty kills going on. I mean, when I say nasty kills, I mean think pieces. You know, it's that 80s over-the-top gore that you'd only really get from Giallo. I don't know if this necessarily classes as Giallo. It's down on here on Wikipedia as a slasher film, but Giallos aren't too far removed from slashers, really. They're pretty much pretty close cousins. And this is a gloved-handed, well, I don't know if it's got gloves. Maybe not gloved-handed. Killer mooching around this location and just taking people apart in quite nasty ways. There's like a pickaxe. I think one of the first kills is with a pickaxe to the back of the throat. It's yeah, I don't know if the mic's picking that up. It is quite intense. And as the kills ramp up, there is just this really great sense of dread that is going on and permeating throughout the whole film. In terms of the performances, I mean, Barbara Cupisti leads the whole performance pretty well. She's a pretty good leading lady in this. The masked killer in the owl mask, I think, was a real stroke of genius because it does look ridiculous. It does look so out there. But then that does also lend itself to when he is stalking through the film his potential victims. Because it would almost be laughable if the violence wasn't so over the top and intense. The score on this, as with a number of the films of the era, is top notch. It doesn't say if it was a band particularly, but just the music was done by Simon Boswell, Guido Anelli, and Stefano Manetti. There's a couple of these set pieces right near the end when the killer is basically on his stage by himself with the corpses set up around him. And it just looks really artistic. For such a violent film, it really does create this ambiance. The mise en scene is really quite spectacular. I had a great time watching Stage Fright. I'd seen it not too long ago, so it was a bit of a recent rewatch for me. But I do think it's a good laugh when it comes to mid-80s slashers. I'm going to give it a pretty solid 7.5 out of 10. Not sure I'm not sure I think it quite hits an 8. I think it is right up there, but I think a 7.5 out of 10 is a pretty fair score for Stage Fright. So, moving on from Stage Fright, we are now going to talk about the modern release, which is Baghead. Video listeners, apologies, it's another film where I forgot to set up the artwork beforehand, so I am going to hastily edit the video while recording. Now, you could say, Tez, this is pre-recorded, so why don't you just edit this out? I can't be asked to make a note of what point this happens and go back and edit it, so we'll make do with what we can right now. So Baghead's 2023 release Directed by Alberto Carrido, written by Christina Pamies, Bryce Maguire, and Lachlan Riley, starring Freya Allen, Jeremy Irvine, and Ruby Barker. A young woman inherits a rundown pub and discovers a dark secret within its basement. Baghead, a shape-shifting creature that will let you speak to lost loved ones, but not without consequence. So essentially, the film kind of sets up straight into quite a pivotal moment of the plot. We're introduced to a guy called Owen Lark who owns this pub, and there is this room underneath with a ancient woman. You don't see too much of them. Who he tries to set on fire. Something doesn't quite go to plan, and he ends up burning to death. This leads to the pub being inherited to his daughter, who has to sign the deeds in her name. His daughter, he hasn't really been in her life for a long time, and she is, I believe, a struggling artist. She's basically struggling to pay the bills and to get by. And so the prospect of now inheriting a property, which, in theory could sell and then make a bit of wonga back, is quite appealing. But she encounters someone who we'd seen at the very start of the film who wants to speak to the woman in the basement, and he will pay a lot of money to do so, which then sets off down this path of what is Baghead? How does it work? I mean, straight off the bat, I will just kind of say this film is fine. I don't necessarily think it's a bad film. There are a couple of kind of creepy... There's a couple of creepy moments, but nothing overtly scary. It feels like it has its influences... wearing them on its sleeve, like the movements of Baghead when it sometimes crawls along the ceilings and has this kind of weird, stuttery, disjointed movements. It does feel very much like a mixture of like Mama and also maybe like the finale of Cobweb. I guess that might be a bit of an in vogue style these days. Baghead itself, not really that scary. The concept, though, is quite interesting. The 2-minute time limit does seem straight out of Talk to Me. I can't remember if it was 2 minutes and that, or if it was 90 seconds. But this whole thing of you can talk to the dead, which is essentially how it works. You give Baghead a possession that it eats or swallows for the time being, and then it uses that to enable you to talk to the dead. But there has to be a 2-minute time limit, and if it goes over that, then Baghead starts getting into your head, and then that gives them the power. The more power they get, the closer they get to escaping the kind of basement prison, almost, that they are in. We get some good lore in this. We do find through some pretty understandable means, pretty inventive means, some background as to what Baghead is. Now you may think, surely there's not going to be books about it. Well, no, but a bit of research then leads to a particular way to contact someone from the past to get some information. I like those aspects, and I do think the acting in this is pretty good. Freya Allen as Iris Lark, and I believe it's Ruby Barker playing her friend Katie, are both pretty good in this. Peter Muller as Owen. Jeremy Irvine is quite good as this creepy chap called Neil, who's got a bit of a dark past. Yeah, I mean, none of the acting is bad in this. And again, it's one of those films where the story concept is kind of interesting. It's not bad. I thought the finale to this was actually quite good. But outside of that, it just wasn't really that gripping. There weren't really any sort of particular low moments. There weren't moments where I rolled my eyes. I mean, there's a bit of a quote-unquote jump scare where it cuts to black, then it cuts to Baghead's face without the mask on for a few seconds and cuts to black. And I kind of thought to myself, what's the point of that other than to try and go, bleh, scary? It just, narratively, it seemed a bit like, I don't know, forced. Wasn't really a big fan of that, but I think the finale to this was quite interesting. It took some interesting turns. Performances were good, but outside of that, it didn't really do a lot for me. So for that reason, I'm going to give Baghead 5.5 out of 10. Giving a lot of 0.5s. I think it's just because it doesn't feel like this is a 5 out of 10. But I don't think I got the enjoyment I would out of a 6 upwards. So I think a 5.5 out of 10 for Baghead is what I'm going to go with this time. Which brings us to the end of this nice little condensed Ministry of Horror. Be sure to follow us on socials. X or Twitter is Ministry_Horror. Over on TikTok is Ministry of Horror. Just search Ministry of Horror, you'll find it. We do clips on TikTok. We do book talk on TikTok. So be sure to give the channel a like and a follow, whatever. Podcast platforms, give us a follow, share it around to your friends. It all helps somehow, I don't know. And YouTube, I will be dropping the videos on YouTube at the same time as podcast platforms. So if you are watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, like, and all that good stuff. It just tells me it's getting out there, which is nice. So there we go. That's the end of another edition of the Ministry of Horror. Good evening, ghouls and fiends.